Some other just brief family news is that Bolshan and Sarah had their baby this last week, and baby boy Henry. And those of you who don't know their story, you can actually find it on our YouTube channel. They shared their testimony a few months ago. Really something of a miracle conception, and wonderful to celebrate with them the birth of that baby boy. So this morning I'm going to be speaking about the ear, about listening. Last week I spoke about the tongue and the power of the tongue, looking at different aspects of how we use our tongue and how we should use our tongue and what God wants to do in our hearts and in our lives. And now I want to talk about the ear and how we listen. And if we talk about the tongue and the power of the tongue, we see how the tongue can be used to incite amazing things for good or bad. It can incite a crowd to riot. It can change the trajectory of a nation, the tongue. But it's true that the ear can do the same thing, because if you close your ear, you can have the same effect. You can incite a crowd to riot by closing your ear. Something like that happened not so long ago. There was a vegetable vendor named Muhammad Bouazizi, lived in a Syrian town called Sidi Bouzid. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that horribly, but that's what happened. And he's a young man. He lost his dad at the age of 3. So early on, as he kind of got to the age where he was responsible for helping provide for his family. He was a street vendor. He would go to the market at midnight, buy fruit and vegetables, and he'd spend the day selling his fruit and vegetables on the streets. By the time late afternoon came, he'd have a nap, wake up at midnight, start again. And Muhammad didn't have a permit. He was unlicensed, and so he used to get harassed by the police and have to pay bribes and kind of constantly be kind of fighting for his survival. And it got to the stage one day where one night, as he was going about his business, they confiscated his scales that he used to weigh out his supplies to sell people. And it was so frustrating, so disturbing to him that he presented himself at the governor's office the next morning and the provincial government building to plead his case. But unfortunately, the governor wouldn't see him, closed his ear to the cry of this fruit vendor, this street vendor. And as in his cousin's word, the cousin described it, he said, no one would listen to him. He had a complaint, he was trying to sort things out, and no one would listen to him. So angry, frustrated, outraged was Muhammad that he set himself on fire outside the government building. You probably know the story. It was 2010. Spent 2 weeks in hospital before he died, but that incident, his setting himself on fire, started the Arab Spring that swept through many Arab nations around that time. Riots, people rising up against kind of the oppressive regimes that they felt they were under, because one man closed his ear, wouldn't hear the complaints of a person trying to sort out the dynamics of their life. The ear is as powerful as the tongue. It can do as amazing things as the tongue. It can have as amazing an effect on our lives, on our society, on the kind of family life, the family dynamic that we have. It's a powerful part of the body. In James chapter 1, verse 19, it says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen. Quick to listen. I want to speak about the reasons for our need to hear one another, the reason to open our ears, what happens when we don't, and just allow that word to kind of sink into us and to consider our own ability and the reasons that we have to shut people out of our lives. First point is that listening to someone shows them that they have value as a person. When you listen to someone, you give dignity to their humanity. There's a sense in which I think Muhammad, in that moment, was feeling like he was a worthless member of society. He had no value in society. No one would hear his voice, no one would listen to his complaint, no one had any kind of interest in his story, in what was troubling his life and how he could kind of make something of his life. He felt like a non-citizen, a non-event in the society in which he lived. There were other people that had higher priority. Other people had access to the governor. Other citizens with their complaints and their issues were more important than Muhammad's. And so it felt like to him, look, I'm just a nobody here, and I'm just not right. It's not fair. leading to his moment of outrage. In our youth on Friday nights, the last couple of weeks or last 2 meetings, they've been talking about identity, discussing the idea of every human being is made in the image of God. That is where we get our identity. We don't get our identity firstly from our culture or from our language, from our wealth, from our class, from our education, from our skills or our talents. We don't get our identity from those things. Firstly, we get them from the fact that we are made in the image of God. It makes every human being a person of dignity. Every human being a person of value. Every person, someone who has something to say, a story to tell, a person who is worth listening to. In the Bible, there's a story of Naaman, a Syrian, who was ill. He had leprosy and struggling with that condition. And in his home was an Israelite slave, a young woman, a young girl. They'd taken her captive in one of their raids into Israel. She was a nobody in Syrian society. She was a captured slave. She was a girl. She was young. She was poor. There's nothing about her status that could give her any value in Syrian society. But she had something to say, and she kept on telling this wife of Naaman, listen, there's a prophet in Israel. There's someone who can help Naaman. There's someone out there that can help Naaman. This person of zero value, zero kind of status in the society. She was the one with the voice that would change that man's life forever. He listened to her. He took her counsel. He went to the prophet and he got healed. And he got saved because he was a worshipper of God from that moment on. Because he was willing to listen to another human being. Not because of who she was, but because she carried in her the image of God, a dignified person. That's why we should listen to one another. My second point is that listening shows that opinions are valid. By listening to someone, we show that their opinion is valid, even if we disagree. Even if it's something totally different to what we believe, or our way of life, or our way of thinking. But to listen shows, look, I value the fact that you have an opinion, and it's valid that you have it. And that's something that you can have. And I give you the respect of listening to what it is. Sometimes we find that generations struggle with each other. Older generations struggle with younger generations, you know. Like the younger generation has something to say, but we can't hear it when we get a bit older. Like, that's just not how we do it, you know. We've always done it this way. We don't do it that way. There's some kind of difference in our generational way of looking at things, and sometimes it causes us to close our ears. Just invalid, not listening to that perspective. It doesn't fit with my worldview. We're not that kind of family. We're not that kind of church. We're not that kind of business. We're not that kind of school. Shut down, shut down, shut down. Ears are closed. Can't hear what someone is wanting to say. It's not just a problem between generations. I think about our cancel culture. You heard that term? Cancel culture. It's the way that people respond to one another on social media. It's like saying, okay, I'm cancelling you out of my life. I disagree with what you're saying. I'm not going to listen to that point of view. People take quite drastic action and they speak quite volatile things to one another. That's a terrible worldview that you have, and you are cancelled out of my life, out of my social media field, everything. We don't tolerate people that have a different view to us. The problem is, the Christian worldview is very unpopular right now. And so it's the Christian worldview that gets cancelled a lot of times because that's unacceptable to the world today. And so you find yourself, if you're a Christian, in a perspective, a place where you can be cancelled. Because you hold an opinion, hold a view that's different to the world around you. And we ourselves as Christians are also guilty of the same thing. Because we sometimes do aggressively shut down someone else's view, just dismiss it because it's not like ours. No, we don't have anything to, I don't want to listen to that, I don't want to hear what you have to say, it's not my worldview, it's not what I think. We shut it out, we close our ears. Not giving someone the dignity of saying, you have an opinion, it's valid, and I'm willing to offer you the gift of listening because I also want to be heard. It's an amazing story in the Bible in Acts. It's Acts chapter 17. It happens in the city of Athens and with the Apostle Paul. I'll just read a couple of verses. Verse 22. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, people of Athens, I see that in every way you're very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you're ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. Verse 28, for in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. Paul, speaking as a believer in Jesus, and in the context of a highly philosophical, highly pagan culture, he definitely disagrees with the worldview of the people that he's speaking to. He definitely has a perspective where there's like a no match. He's talking to people that are pagan worshippers. They have all kinds of idols, so many idols. They even have one that says it's to an unknown God. He's talking to kind of the leading philosophers of his age. They have philosophies about life. They have an understanding about how life works. But Paul has come to the place where he says, I've given my whole life to this man Jesus. There's this man who lived and died. He was God. He died in my place, and I believe that he is the way to meet with God. He's got a completely different worldview. But he doesn't sweep into Athens saying, I'm closed to everything else that you've got to say. Let me tell you my message. He spends time walking around that city, observing their practices and their way of worship. He knows enough about them and their perspective and their point of view that he can say, hey, listen, I can see that you're a very religious people. You're very zealous for religion. You want to please God. You have this desire to be worshippers of whatever God may be out there. You even have an idol to an unknown God. You know, in your context, you know that there are things about God that you don't know. God is beyond you. You even know that, as religious as you are. And let me touch on those things that you don't know about God and share with you some of my story. He begins to speak to them about their poets, some of your poets. Not Christian poets, not Jewish poets. Not like only from my tradition, that I can only quote authors from my tradition. No, some of your poets. They say that we're the offspring of God. Human beings are the offspring of God. I believe that too. I believe that every human being is made in the image of God. He finds this contact point with what they have to say. And then he brings his message. If we're the offspring of God, if we are the offspring made in the image of God, how can that God be an idol made from gold or silver, crafted by a human being? How can a human being bearing the image of God come from that? But he could never have that conversation without first listening to what they have to say. He can never have that conversation without first giving them the dignity of understanding their worldview and their perspective. Sometimes we're so arrogant in a way that we're willing to just shut down something we don't believe that's wrong and just shut it out, shut it out, shut it out, shut it out. But in the way we do it, we cut ourselves off from a conversation that could be life-giving, changing to a culture, a nation, a city, by being willing to open our ears. Another reason that we should listen is because it shows that we're not self-sufficient. We don't know everything. We need each other. There's nothing worse than working with someone who thinks they're always right. Tell me you know what I mean. I've been in a workplace and there's some person that just never listens to anybody else, always got something to say, always has to be right, never takes someone's advice. We hate it. We hate working with people like that because it just gives us the impression that they are everything to everyone. They know everything. They don't need anybody else. Sometimes it's pride. Causes people to close their ears like that, but sometimes it's insecurity. It's the fear of being wrong. It's the sense of being, I don't want to be found out. I don't want to kind of have someone else show me up with a better idea, like I'm not as experienced as I should be, or something like that. There's this self-defense mechanism. We shut other people's out, make ourselves self-sufficient, don't listen, but we miss out on the wonder and the beauty of the people that God has given us in our lives. We've seen people, I'm sure, you know people that may have even ruined their lives by refusing to take counsel. Ruined a nation even. I think about the story of Egypt in the Exodus. You know, when Moses comes to deliver the people of Israel, it's a dramatic time in history, and he's doing all these miracles. There's plagues breaking out. First one plague comes and Pharaoh says, okay, stop the plague. I'll let you go. And then the plague stops and he says, no, I'm not going to let you go. And then another plague comes. Imagine living in those times. It must have been like incredible, fear, awesome, like just what is going on here? And it gets further and further and further on, and eventually Pharaoh's own counselors, are saying, please Pharaoh, can't you see this nation's being wiped out? Just let these people go. Exodus 10 verse 7, Pharaoh's officials said to him, how long will this man be a snare to us? Let the people go, so that they may worship the Lord their God. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is ruined? Don't you realize it, Pharaoh? No, I'm not listening to you. I'm going to keep those people here. They're not going to win. I'm not going to let Moses beat me. I'm not going to let the Israelites win. They're doing work for us. They're our slaves. I'm going to keep on this course. I'm going to keep on this course. My ears are closed even to my closest counselors. And the nation is ruined. And the army is destroyed in the floods that closed the Red Sea. All because someone will not open their ears. Tragic. Cain and Abel. It's one of the first stories in the Bible. Two sons, brothers, bringing their offering to God in worship. Abel's offering is acceptable. Cain's is not acceptable. We find Cain in a position where he's wrestling with this idea that his offering is not acceptable. And God is speaking to him about it. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? There's a way through. All you have to do is bring the offering that's acceptable. Here is the counsel. Here is what I'm saying to you. But if you don't, sin is crouching at your door and it desires to have you. But he won't listen, even to God, Cain. My offering should be acceptable. This is the way I want to worship God. This is what I'm going to do. And despite even the voice of God counseling him, he shuts his ears, murders his brother. And so begins the tragedy of human existence and violence and pain. Listening to others gives you the right to be heard. All of us want to be heard, isn't it? It's frustrating when you're in that position where you feel like you're speaking but just never getting heard, overlooked. You feel like it's wrong. It's wrong. I'm trying to speak, but you're not listening to me. I feel hurt. I feel like something is wrong with this situation. But sometimes the reason that happens is because we ourselves are closed. It's our closed ears that are preventing someone else from listening to what we have to say. It happens in close relationships like marriages or parents and children or partnerships in business or brothers and sisters. These kinds of close relationships, they can get into a place where there's a cycle of just not listening to each other. People shout louder and louder, but no one actually hears anything. One of the listening skills that counselors teach is so powerful because it breaks down that cycle by forcing us to listen to the other person. They tell us what you should do is you should tell the other person what they are saying in your own words. Getting into a fight with Lee, maybe? We're not having a fight. But like, let's just say I was. And she tells me something that she's upset with, something that I'm doing wrong. And instead of telling her what she does wrong and what I think of this or what I think of that, to de-escalate that conflict, it's okay, Lee, let me tell you what I think you're saying to me. I think you're upset with me because I did this and it made you feel like that. Am I right? Am I right? Is that what's happened? Is that how you feel? And it certainly changes the conversation from one of anger towards one another to one of understanding. Either, yes, you're right, do you get it, Phil? Or, like, no, that's not it at all. Let me try and explain it again. And suddenly we're talking about the issue itself and not at each other. And so that conversation, that moment where I'm willing to listen and try and make sure I understand, it opens the door for you to say, okay, Phil, so what is it that you don't agree with about it? Let me try and put what I think you're saying in my words. And so opening our ears opens someone else's ears too. You with me? It gives us the right to be heard when we are willing to listen. The amazing thing about the Christian faith is that we have a God who speaks and a God who listens. The Bible is full of stories about God speaking, the privilege that we have as human beings of hearing the voice of God. In fact, one of the many kind of complaints through the Bible, many kind of times that the people are kind of rebuked or criticized or corrected, is when they're not listening, when they don't want to hear what God has to say. In 2 Kings chapter 17, it says this: they worshipped idols, though the Lord had said, "You shall not do this." The Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers. Turn from your evil ways, observe my commands and decrees in accordance with the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I delivered to you through my servants the prophets. But they would not listen, and were as stiff-necked as their ancestors who did not trust in the Lord their God. That's like one of the constant cries of God through the Bible. I'm speaking, but you're not listening to me. I'm telling you about who I am, my character, my nature. I'm telling you about how to worship me, what I like and what is good for your life, the best way to live, the way of life that's best for a human being. But even though I'm speaking and speaking and speaking, it's like you've closed your ears to me and you don't want to hear. In this case, it's the very reason that the Israelites were swept up into exile, taken out of their promised land, because they refused to listen to God over and over again. And yet, He's this God who is willing to share His heart with us. He's willing to tell us everything He feels so passionately about. He's willing to share what He cares about, what makes Him happy, what makes Him sad, what makes Him angry. It's one of the primary characteristics of the life of Jesus is that He's constantly listening to His Father's voice, constantly hearing what the Father has to say. It's almost, if you read through the Gospel accounts, it's almost as though He won't do anything unless He knows the Father is leading Him to do it. He won't say something. He won't even change His tone of voice. The Bible says, you tell me how to say it, what to say and how to say it. That's what Jesus spoke about, His relationship with the Father, this incredible union, this willingness to listen to the Father in heaven. Jesus said this is the hallmark. It's one of the key marks of being a Christian, hearing the voice of God and listening to what He says. John chapter 10, this is Jesus speaking. The gatekeeper opens the gate for Him and the sheep listen to His voice. He calls His own sheep by name and He leads them out. When He brought them out, He goes on ahead of them and His sheep follow Him because they know His voice. But they'll never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from Him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. It's Jesus describing a Christian. Here's what makes a Christian. Here's how we know someone's a Christian. They hear the voice of God. They know what God is saying. They're willing to respond. They recognize when it's a different voice, where something is leading them or some temptation is coming their way and it's not God. They're able to recognize there's a conviction, there's a sense of constant communion with God. That's what it means to be a Christian. He showed us what it's like Himself. He told us that's what it's like to be a Christian. And all through the Bible, we see these warnings and these encouragements. Don't close your ears. Listen to what I have to say. That's what it means to be a Christian. But even more staggering than that is a God who's willing to hear your voice, who hasn't closed His ears to your cry. Why would God listen to you or to me? All our stuff, all our history, all the baggage that we carry through life, all the times that we've let Him down and not even really considered Him, sometimes known exactly what He wants us to do and done something else. So many times we've disappointed God. Why would God listen to our voice? And yet, He does. He opens His ears to the human race. Over and over and over again, we hear Him say in the Bible about Him hearing the cry of His people. It happened in that Exodus story when the people of Israel were struggling under that slavery and crying out under the burden of oppression. The Bible says, and now the cry of the Israelites has reached me. The cry of the Israelites has reached me. It's like I was bending my ear over heaven, listening to what was happening on the earth. And I heard the cry of my people suffering under their oppression. And I heard it. And I have come to act. The psalmist is just going on and on and on. Hear me, Lord. Hear my cry for mercy. Hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry over and over again, bringing our cry before God. Of course, sometimes that cry, especially the first time we're coming towards God to come in a relationship with Him, it's a cry for salvation. It's a cry of recognition of our need of God. It's a cry that recognizes I'm a sinner and I need God. I've got stuff in my life that is not good and I need to get rid of it, and Jesus is willing to take it. And so this cry is kind of the first cry that springs from our heart, and we cry out for forgiveness and He gives it, and for grace and He gives it, and for mercy and He gives it, and for a new start and He gives it, because He hears the cry of the human race. But not only that cry, every prayer you pray as we walk through this life. God, I need your help in this situation. I need your wisdom. God, I need healing. Suffering in some aspect of my health, I need healing. God, I need provision. I can't make it through the week or through the month. I need provision. I need your help, God. God, I need a friend. I need a friend. I'm lonely in this life. I need a friend. Every prayer we bring to Him, He hears. And in fact, He's longing to hear your voice. It's not like we are sometimes. Fine, I'll listen to you now. God's not like that. It's like He's waiting. It's like He's leaning over. When are you going to tell me you need me? When are you going to share with me the pain that's in your heart? When are you going to cry out for what only I can do in your life? He's waiting. He's willing. The prophet Jeremiah says, this is what the Lord says. He who made the earth, the Lord who formed it and established it, the Lord is His name. Call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. What a way to couch it, the prophet. It's not just like a side note in his writings, oh yeah, by the way, God said, call on me. This is what the Lord said. The maker of heaven and earth, who formed it and established it, the Lord is His name, God Himself. Speaking from the heavens, this is what He said, call to me and I will answer and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. Last week, I spoke about the power of the tongue and the need for God to work in our hearts so that our tongues reflect the life that we have in Jesus. This week, we're looking at the gift of listening. How powerful a gift that is that we can offer to one another. The incredible opportunity to show that you value someone as a human being by listening to what they have to say. Giving validity to their opinion, even if you disagree, by opening your ears to listen. We listen because we're not self-sufficient. We don't have it all together. We need the voice of others around us. And we listen because we also want the right to be heard. But most of all, we listen because God is speaking. He has something to say to you in your life. It could be a message of salvation if you've never put your faith in Him. He could be speaking to you about that right now. Put your faith in me. Put your faith in me. You may not understand it all. You may not see the end, how it's going to work out. You may not know how I'm going to change your life or how my circumstances will change. You don't need to know. What you need to know is that I love you, that I gave my Son for you, and I'm willing to save you. That could be the voice that God is speaking to you, but it could be many other things He's saying. He wants to lead you. He wants to guide you. He wants to direct your life. And He wants us to speak to Him because His ears are open to hear our cry. Amen. Let's bow our heads in a moment. Father, when we think about the little organs of the tongue and the ear, sometimes we feel hopeless because we don't use them like we should. We recognize that we are so human. So often we close our ears and refuse to listen. whether it's to another human being, a wife, a husband, a colleague, a brother, a sister. Our hearts get hard and we just block people off so easily. Father, help us today. Help us today to let that go. Soften our hearts, open our ears. Help us to offer every human being the dignity of being able to express their opinion. Being able to hear what they have to say, being able to offer them the gift of valuing their life, their experience, their words as a human being. But Lord, beyond that, we pray for help in our relationship with you. You think about Jesus and his easy relationship with you, his Father, the way he so seamlessly seems to know exactly what you want to do and how to do it, and how he speaks words that are true and powerful, yet gracious and merciful. Help us to become more like him. That we might hear your voice more clearly. That we might know more immediately what it is that you're saying and what you want for us to do in response. Help us, Lord, to express our need to you. Help us not to complain to one another, but never bring our request to you. Help us to bring our cry to the throne of heaven, because you said that we can come to you and you will hear us. So change our lives, open our ears, save us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much for being here this morning and for listening and for worshiping together. We've got tea and coffee and eats. I'd love to get to know you a little bit better. The kids ministry program is probably wrapping up there next door. There are things you can sign up for. Please don't forget to help with the painting in the SOS Village. If you want to get baptized, come and speak to one of the leaders. Other than that, have an amazing week. I look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you.
What's from all that?